All right, you lovely people, we're back to finish up this module on law and ethics. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of applied ethics. Recall applied ethics is just looking at a specific case or a specific field or a specific problem and trying to figure out what we ought to be doing in that specific case or instance. And this case of, Johnson & Johnson and the Tainted Tylenol. Name of a murder mystery retreat. I don't know. But this is a business case study. So this is an example, a very widely used, I would say, a widely used example in business ethics. Because I think what we see here is something really remarkable, something we don't see very often, even today. And at the time, I think people really knew that what they were seeing was pretty special. Namely, a business was going way above and beyond what the law required of them, especially if you look at modern pharmaceutical companies, which Johnson & Johnson is, or at least part of. We don't expect such behavior anymore. It's pretty sad. But CEO James Burke, who was in charge of Johnson & Johnson at the time, is a legend. When he passed away, I think about it maybe 15 years ago now. I'm trying to remember. When he passed away, it was a big deal. People really realized it was the passing or ending of a generation. James Burke really did some amazing stuff when dealing with this really big crisis. So let's jump on into that. I mean, one thing that's worth noting is that Tylenol was a pretty new product when this was happening in the early 80s. It had been around for maybe 7 years, hadn't been around for very long. It was brand new. And I don't know if you guys know much about Tylenol. I mean, Tylenol, it's the chemical compound is acetaminophen. This is in America, that's Tylenol. I think in other countries it's called Panadol. Maybe there's even other versions, but the generic name is acetaminophen. Oh man, I'm sure a bio student's going to email me, Professor, you're pronouncing it wrong. Again, I told you the email to send that to earlier. All complaints go to sorrynotsorry@gmail.com. But it's a pretty amazing drug because I don't know if you guys know much about NSAIDs. That's the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. They're called NSAIDs. I hurt my knee, so I had to learn all about this stuff. But NSAIDs are like aspirin or ibuprofen. And the thing about these is that they're not the safest thing in the world. I mean, they're not, you'd probably take them, don't panic, but you usually have to eat them with either a lot of water or food because they can cause damage to the lining of your stomach and cause bleeding. And so that's why sometimes if you take an aspirin or an ibuprofen, you might get a stomach ache and just, no, that's not good. But usually that's why the doctors will all say, take it with a glass of water or take with juice or have a small meal when you take these drugs. Those are NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Now, acetaminophen rocked the market. It's not an NSAID. It was marketed as one of the safest drugs you could ever take because it would not do such damage to your stomach, but it would relieve pain, as I'm sure a lot of you take Tylenol or its generic equivalent of acetaminophen. So it was seen as revolutionary. Of course, there's some things that people have been overdosing and things more recently. There's lots of documentaries and things you can Google about the dark side of Tylenol these days. But back then, in the early 80s, it was new, novel, seen as so safe and amazing, and its market share was skyrocketing. It was pretty impressive. But then what happened was in the early 80s is that people were taking Tylenol died. Because I don't know if you knew this, but so this is like when I was a baby, it used to be that you'd put the medicine inside a little capsule, but you could, if you wanted to, I guess, cut open the capsule and pour out the stuff. And there's all the little pills, the medicine in there. And turns out not the safest way to prepare drugs, because today most drugs are contained inside a solid thing. Can't be opened because it's all solid. And that came about, by the way, largely because of what I'm about to describe. So what happened is I'm not kidding. These are like the saddest stories in the world you'll hear about, like a mother giving their child, child has a headache. So you give them Tylenol, the safest drug you could give a child. And the child starts vomiting blood and dies. And this happened. Children, others died in Chicago. And what they had discovered was that some of these Tylenol capsules did not contain medicine, did not contain the acetaminophen, but contained cyanide. And later they would find out that someone, we still don't know who, no one was ever caught in this, but someone had gone into stores in Chicago, bought big things of the drug, opened up the capsules, took out the medicine, put cyanide in them, resealed the capsules, put them back on the shelf. And then people bought them and died. And so you had people dying. I forget the final death toll, 5 or 6 people ended up dying from this, and some being children. It's heartbreaking and terrible. But you could imagine at the time that this was a big deal for Johnson & Johnson. The executive board meeting was called, and they had to figure out what they were going to do about this once it was clear that it was their product. Johnson & Johnson is the manufacturer of Tylenol. What were they going to do? Now, today, I think if you thought about this, you'd probably think, well, they probably called the lawyer. And what do you think the lawyer would have advised them? I mean, take a moment, think about that. Your product implicated in killing people. You have no idea what happened. You didn't put the cyanide there, at least not that you don't think you did. What would the lawyer say? I think you can imagine. The lawyer probably says, say nothing, say you're doing an internal review, something like that. Be very vague, non-committal publicly. Privately do a very careful internal study to find out, were you at fault? And if you were at fault, okay, well, we'll deal with it then. Probably go to court. But if you're found not to be fault, then we'll announce it's not our problem. Case closed. So basically, the lawyers would say, do nothing except an internal review to make sure we weren't responsible. And as long as we weren't responsible, then case closed from our perspective. We're done. And is that what happened, though? No. Again, James Burke, he was amazing. I have former students who made their Twitter profile this guy. It's pretty funny. But he decided instead, first of all, he said, I'm going to do any interview with even 60 Minutes, which you guys might know is a pretty challenge. You don't go on 60 Minutes unless you're brave, because they're going to ask you tough questions. But he said, if anyone wants to interview me, I will accept all interviews. I will answer all questions about what we're doing about this. And well, what did they do about this? Well, they didn't look at the law to tell them what to do, which was, as I already told you, very little. Do the internal review, make sure it wasn't your fault. No, instead, they looked at the Johnson & Johnson Credo. It's on this gigantic marble thing they have in their headquarters, and I think it's in New Jersey. I can check. They have this huge marble slab that has it's their credo, telling what they as a company value. And I'll pop it up there, and you can see, and you can read the first line. What is the most important thing to this company? We believe our first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses, and patients, to mothers and fathers, and all others who use our products and services, and so on. So you can see right away, if you look it's only at the end do you get the stockholders. At the very end, finally, the people providing the money come up. No, their first responsibility is to the people who are using their product. And Burke said, we are going to take this seriously. And so what did they do? They did a massive recall of their product. Costs not just in Chicago, everywhere. In the United States, you can imagine, that's millions of dollars of product. And they went through it all, trying to identify where was the tainted cyanide. And they were able to establish pretty early on that this did not happen in their factories. But as I described, someone had gone into a store and pulled, and they were able to isolate which stores it happened with, because they did this exhaustive recall. They offered coupons where you return your Tylenol product. We'll give you a coupon for either another one of our pills or for our competitors. Imagine that. That's pretty wild. And it didn't just go beyond, it didn't even just do there about that's just trying to figure out where it happened and were they responsible or not. They did that, of course, but they went beyond. They did a massive recall, did not have to do that. Absolutely not. And then they went out, again, all interviews they did, and they also started devising how to make their product safer. And this is where we get today things that you guys probably just take for granted that have existed your entire life. This is where we got the triple seal, where now you have it comes in a box. You have to open the box. The box is glued shut. If the box has been tampered with, do not buy the drug because it's been tampered with. That's seal number 1. Seal number 2 is usually there's some kind of plastic wrapper around the lid. If that seal or that little thing has been tampered with, do not use it. That is seal number 2. Seal number 3 is that dang foil that always is so hard for me to get off. Again, if that third seal, that foil thing on the top is tampered with, do not buy the product. And so this is where we got the triple seal. The government did not make this happen. This was the business trying to figure out how to make its product better. And so you already start to see about how here in business, how ethics is different from the law. If the law had to decide this, who knows what we would have ended up with, but you let the business figure out what the right thing to do was, and it came up with something that soon everyone uses. I don't know now, I could look it up, I'm not a lawyer, but for all I know, this is now required. But at the time, it was not required. They did it voluntarily. And the amazing thing is the people responded to this. You can imagine they were flying high as a new drug, and then they cratered when they did the recall, and everyone's scared of Tylenol and other drugs. But then because they did all this stuff, they were able to build the trust back in their consumers, who then returned. And you can see how in this little picture here is that they went from 35% market share to 8%. Any business student will tell you that is awful. And a business would probably shut down because of that, or a division or something. The product would have probably been cut. But because of what they took, within a year, they were back to 29%, from 8 to 29%. Any business student will tell you that is nothing short of amazing. And they did that because they wanted to earn their trust. And I think we can learn some lessons from this, both in terms of what businesses should do, but I think in terms of what us as regular people should do. And the first and foremost thing is know your values. I mean, know the law. Have a lawyer if you need one, but know your values. Isn't that, know what you stand for? What will you die for? Isn't this like something out of Alexander Hamilton?
If you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for?
You need to know your values in order to be able to act on them. And then, of course, don't just know them, act on them, of course. That's, I think, a very key lesson, is that we need to know our values. And if those values matter, they matter. And people will care. And that's why I think we also learn not only just know your values and act on your values, but also people care about your ethics. In the case of Johnson & Johnson, the customers cared, the executives cared. You want to work for an ethical company. You want to buy from an ethical company. And society cared because, man, there was so much mistrust in all of medicine or in all of pharmaceuticals because of that. And, man, if I was Tylenol's competitor, I'd be very thankful for what they did, because my bottom line would have been affected too. If no one trusts medicine anymore, or pills, drugs, I'm in trouble too. But because Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson was able to restore consumer trust, that helped their competitors, helped society. They created better mechanisms. So you can start to see that we care about ethics in a very fundamental way. We want you to obey the law, I suppose, generally, but think again about civil disobedience. But apart from that, we want you to obey the law. And that's fine, but we expect more than that. We expect you to be a good person. I do not trust you if all I believe about you is that you won't hurt me as long as you are worried about the law. Because the minute you feel you can get away with a crime, I don't trust you. Do you think you'll get away with it? Because every criminal thinks they're going to get away. I don't trust that person. I trust the person whose actions demonstrate that they're not concerned about the law, but they're concerned about doing the right thing. Dramatic again. Well, that's what we do. Anyway, that's enough. I hope that made sense. So again, I think that's the key idea. The key takeaways from their actions we do expect people to go above and beyond the law. And to do that, you really do need to know your values and what you stand for. All right, that's enough. What do we say? Put your arm up. Put your hand down, pat you on the back, get rid of the arm flab, get rid of your arm flag. You've completed the videos for another module. Take the quizzes, and you're done. All right, take care.